Great to be here. Thank you, Arnie. Thank you, Maria. Thanks to all of you for being here. And special thanks both to Leadership DeKalb and to the DeKalb Chamber for putting this event together, and to Callenwald for hosting it. It is really wonderful to be here with all of you. But you're not really here to hear me, other than to say that I'm a proud graduate of Leadership DeKalb, class of 1990, which has won accreditation as the best class. Many of you have known Michael Thurmond, if not as interim superintendent in the brief time he's held the job, but certainly in many of the other jobs he has held. He has been the state director of DFACS. Prior to that, he was a state representative. He's a former labor commissioner. But he said the thing he's proudest of are author, historian, and a proud father of a daughter who somehow lost her way and is now in the media. Please welcome DeKalb's interim superintendent, Michael Thurmond. Got to turn your mic on if you got that. There you go. Okay.
Good morning.
We'll start just with a real tiny little question. The accreditation process from SACS talks a lot about governance. But one of the most important things, obviously, is to try to take what happens at the board level and bring it down into the classroom, or keep the focus on the classroom. What's the link among governance, board, teaching, and then ultimately what goes on every day for every child in this county?
Great question. And first, as already been introduced, I want to recognize the full members of our newly reconstituted board. And of course, governance begins at the top. But as you really understand the definition, and I think there was some confusion that when SACS mentioned the issue of governance in the DeKalb County School District, we focus almost exclusively on governance at the board level. But governance actually encompasses the entire organization. It's how not just board members interrelate to each other, but it's how we relate and communicate with every person who works in the school district, as well as all of our stakeholders. So what we've done is taken a more holistic approach. We're reaching out through the MLA Governance Center to interview various stakeholders from throughout the district, from the various communities, parents, teachers, with focus groups, but also some parent groups that may not have been heard from. We're also talking to students. We're talking internally. But the first thing we have to do is open up the lines of communication. We have to be transparent. And in order to govern effectively, in the invocation this morning, I think the gentleman spoke best. The first criteria is that in order to govern anyone, first you must be willing to listen, and you have to communicate the fact that you will respect the opinion of all people, even those you may not necessarily disagree with.
One of the things that, and Arnie mentioned the conversation I had with Oglethorpe's president, Dr. Lawrence Schall. It was yesterday, actually. And he brought up what we were just talking about, the link between governance and student achievement. And his argument was, certainly the new board members will help with the governance and getting that going, but he's not sure how directly they can affect what goes on in the classroom. DeKalb has tried to get off of an achievement plateau. So how do you then put all of those together so that achievement goes up? Listening is a start, but what specifically do you have in mind to work on what happens in the classroom?
Well, this board and myself has set improving academic achievement as a priority. Resolving the issues with SACS is immediate. The long term, we have to focus on redirecting our focus, attention, and resources to improving academic performance in the classroom. You do that through governance. Number one, hopefully you will hire a superintendent who is focused, and that has to be communicated through the senior management to regional superintendents, principals, and the people that they hire. You set the model by, and one of the things we're doing at the last board and even in my discussion, it's not just a conversation about SAC, but it's about recognizing that, number one, we have an extremely diverse student population, but accepting and believing that every child, given the opportunity, can achieve and can learn. It's about refocusing priorities and the agenda in that direction.
What about resources, though? It's one thing to say, okay, we want the children to be, each child to believe that he or she can achieve. How do you plan to dedicate the resources, and can you move things around to do that, to get them more focused at the classroom level?
Well, first, you have to get our fiscal house in order.
Well, that's one of SAC's mandates.
Right, and that should be one of our mandates, irrespective of SAC. We've been granted the public trust, and that requires us to manage the resources that we have in a way that will support academic achievement and accomplishment in our classroom. Now, obviously, we are suffering like every other school district because of a lack of resources. But that does not excuse us from taking advantages of the resources that we do have. Think about it. The DeKalb Property Digest 6 years ago was about $27 billion. Today it's roughly about $18 billion. You and I know that the primary source of revenue for any local school district is ad valorem taxes. That's had an impact. Also recognizing that the state of Georgia, facing budget challenges as well, has cut local funding by several $billion since the beginning of the recession. This is a confluence of events that makes it extremely difficult to manage, but we will not offer as an excuse what the state is doing or the state of the economy. We have a corporation that actually oversees the expenditure of nearly $1 billion, 730 million general fund dollars. We will do a better job of using the resources that we have to accomplish the goals that we set. I think we've lost our way at some point, to be honest with you. We've gotten caught up into the politics and to what I call the adult mess. We got to refocus our attention from the adult mess and focus it on making sure we support the efforts of our students.
Does that mean specifically moving resources from central office to classroom, or is there enough really to make a difference there? Or at some point, do you have to, despite everything that this district has gone through, and there's a timeline on the back of your program that gives you the recent history, do you go to the voters and say, look, we've lost our property tax revenue, we're going to have to ask for a tax increase?
I don't think we can do that until we first demonstrate to the public that we are properly managing the resources that we have. Then and only then will we be able to ask anyone to provide additional resources. And in many instances, we need more money, but money is not necessarily the issue. It's how we govern. It's our principles and whether we stick with those principles. For instance, we are eliminating right now a $16 million deficit in the current fiscal year. My CFO came to me shortly after I was appointed and stated that, of course, we think we're on track to significantly reduce the deficit this fiscal year. But in order to be certain that we are moving in the right direction, he recommended, and I agreed, to implement a hiring freeze across the district. But with a caveat, the hiring freeze will not impact teachers or indirect or direct classroom instruction. The hiring freeze is at the central office. To me, that is us articulating to our employees and to the broader public that we are putting the classroom and teachers first. Even if we don't have but $1, that dollar ought to be spent supporting our classrooms, supporting our teachers, and improving academic performance.
Brings up a question that we got from the teacher point of view. DeKalb right now is losing teachers to neighboring school districts. We've had 4 years of furlough days in the system. So you've got to retain the teachers you have, the experienced teachers. Number one, do you have a plan to retain them? And number two, how do you evaluate the teachers you have to make sure that you have the best ones?
Well, that's an ongoing process. And there were non-renewals this year for some teachers who were not performing up to standard. But that's true in any profession. You will always have individuals, for whatever reason, who don't perform up to standards, and you have to make those decisions. But at the same time, the reality is what it is. And this is what I've said as I've traveled around the district, talked to teachers, and not just teachers. And one of the things I want to clarify, everyone is important. Obviously, our teachers are primarily important. But if the bus drivers don't deliver the kids to school on time and safe, there is no school. If our cafeteria workers are not there providing the food, the breakfast and the lunch for our students, it makes it even more difficult to learn. One of the principles, one of the ideas, one of the concepts is that I'm communicating is that there will be no big I's and little U's. Everyone is important. And by encouraging that type of understanding, I think that builds morale. Being honest with individuals. One of the challenges, one of the aha moments from talking with many of our employees is that they had not been properly informed and educated to understand the connection between not receiving salary increases or increase in furloughs and the budget crisis. And some of you all will be surprised, but there was a disconnect between connecting the current economic crisis with some of the financial decisions that have been made. So what you have to do is you have to be honest. Then another thing, many teachers, administrators, staff members say, look, you know, this is the first time in years we've had an opportunity to engage the superintendent and the senior staff in a conversation. You cannot lead if you do not communicate. Even bad news, delivered honestly and fairly, will generate support from the people you're trying to lead and for the people you're trying to serve.
Is there a plan right now to set up evaluation systems for not just teachers, but then all of the folks you just talked about?
Oh, absolutely. That's in place. There's a lot of good news and good things occurring in DeKalb, and two of the best things you will hear from a 2-hour star student. When I was talking to, in a situation, in a gathering similar to this, and one of the things I encourage all leaders, and I talked to leadership at DeKalb, I had a conversation with them, the current class, who claims that they're the best class ever by now. But that when you go into a crisis situation, you should always avoid deficit-driven strategies. And it's not just a crisis situation, but that's life. You've been in meetings in your community, in your church, at your business, in your neighborhood, where you spend minutes, if not hours, discussing all the things that are wrong. That is a deficit-driven strategy. I suggest, and what I have adopted, are asset-driven strategies. I look first at the assets in a situation. And for all of my friends who come up and offer me my condolences because I've taken this position, I look at them and wonder. I say, I really don't understand what you're talking about. Because there are challenges and there are problems, but the assets and the opportunities outweigh the challenges. And one gentleman asked, well, what assets do you have at DeKalb right now? And I said, look, first thing is, we have 98,000 assets, and those are our beautiful, bright, and intelligent students. And once you recognize that, the other problems pale in comparison to the opportunities that we have.
Let's pick up then on what you had when you came in. Dr. Atkinson, when she was here, was starting to put together a plan for the district going forward. And so have you had a chance to look at that, or is there anything about it that you want to carry forward? One specific question was, do you have any plans to restart the DeKalb Education Foundation, which was, at least for the moment, stopped under Dr. Atkinson?
Well, what I've done, I've reached out to some of our corporate friends, and as we become more healthy in the district, we will be asking them to support the foundation so that we can provide some nonprofit support for the efforts that we are ongoing in the school system. You know, I didn't have the opportunity to meet Dr. Atkinson, and every leader comes with a vision, with a plan, with a program. Some strategies, some initiatives are successful and some are not, but you can learn from both. And one of the things I come to understand that you can learn more from one failure, one defeat, than you can from 1,000 victories. And one of the lessons learned that we are engaged in right now is that you must communicate, and you must be transparent, and you must engage all of your stakeholders, internal and external. You can't make it. The second thing I'm learning, it's really been fascinating, the tour of DeKalb County. Last night I was in Brookhaven. I met with the mayor and council in Brookhaven. And the mayor, by the way, is the son of a former colleague, and Max Davis, yep, that you covered when we were there in the General Assembly way back in the 20th century. And Dennis and I have been around a long time, to be honest with you. But just in talking to the residents of DeKalb County, from north to south, east and west, and if you listen intently and with purpose and actively, you can find so many opportunities for common ground. But yet, if I travel from my house there in Stone Mountain, as I did one Sunday afternoon up to Dunwoody, it was just a 15-minute drive, but sometimes politically it felt like 2,000 miles. What we have to recognize is some of the dysfunction that we face at the school board is really dysfunction in the county. And what we have, and it was representative of some of the dysfunction in the county. But we have to find common ground, build bridges, and do what's best for our citizens and particularly our students. We had a great meeting in Brookhaven last night. Former State Senator Dan Weber, he has a plan that focuses on creating high school charter systems where you really decentralize authority all the way to the high school level. That's not necessarily my belief, but I do believe where we do share common ground is that we are going to decentralize some decision making, some resources from the central office to the regional level, right? One of our area superintendents, Dr. Pringle, is sitting there in the left. We need to, I've always believed, in any situation I've gone in, is that decisions that are made closest to the delivery of the service or the product are better, are more effective and efficient. So we have over-centralized some of the decision-making into the central office at DeKalb. We are going to change that, and you will see evidence of that in our FY14 budget because we are so diverse. I can't sit like the Wizard of Oz behind a curtain and make decisions about the 138 schools that's serving an extremely diverse population without input from the people who are closest to the point of delivery. And those people are the teachers and the principals and the support staff in the school. That will change. And I think we will end up with a more effective school district with better results.
Is there anything in what you inherited from either Dr. Atkinson or going back Ramona Tyson? Was there anything that they did that you said, okay, we can go forward with this? It's already specifically. Or are we really starting from scratch?
Oh, absolutely not. We're not starting from scratch. This is the result. What we have today is a system that was developed over decades. And one of the things, because I'm a historian, you have to really do what I call develop an institutional history of any and every agency. And we may be upset or confused by a particular policy or regulation, but you have to understand the history of that policy and the history of the regulation even before you can determine whether or not you will continue it or change it. And so you learn from mistakes as well as from successes. And there have been more successes than failures, but you have to be honest. You have to recognize it, learn from your mistake, but don't dwell on it. And that's what I'm saying to DeKalb County and to the people I work with every day as well as the citizens. We will learn from the mistakes that have been made, and I will be the first to admit that there have been mistakes that have been made, but I'm telling you, I'm not dwelling there. My focus, my attention is on the future. and doing what's best for the young people in this district. What I encourage, and I've talked to Ernie, he and I have had several conversations, and I want to thank Ernie for his leadership, and Leonardo, who not just, and Diane, who decided not just to criticize, but to engage and try to support and assist. What we have to understand, and it's interesting, and I hear it a lot, when people say, well, you know, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we had a great school district in DeKalb. How many times have you heard it? I mean, it's just, and that's no question that we did. That does not prevent us from having a great school system now. But what we have to recognize is that the school system that existed in DeKalb 30 years ago, that population is not necessarily the population we're trying to educate today. That population did not have 71% of its students qualifying for free and reduced lunch. Just didn't. Not that children who qualify for free and reduced lunch can't learn and can't be successful, and I know for a fact that they can because I qualified for free and reduced lunch. I am a living, breathing example of the power of public education, right? The son, the grandson, and the great-grandson of 3 generations of Georgia sharecroppers who could not read or write, right? And so for people who doubt or don't believe that public education can be successful and is being successful every day, look at me. Now, what I also know is that we have to be honest about who we are. One of the most surprising things about what I've learned about DeKalb is that nearly 20% of our student population are either English learning students or their parents speak English only as a second language if they speak English at all. We've not engaged or understood the great opportunities that that presents. Now, one of the mistakes that we did make was that we fired all the interpreters. Okay, right? We did it. Now, that's a mistake that I will acknowledge. When 20% of your population, and I don't know why I'm surprised, because when I was practicing law over at Butler Wooten, our office was on Buford Highway. And I used to ride up and down Buford Highway to go to lunch, and I would see the Vietnamese and the Hispanic and the different signage from the various businesses from all over the world. I love to go to the supermarket there in Clarkston, right? And I see foods and exotic vegetables and fruits and desserts from all over the world. And I used to wonder, who's buying this? You know, I have no idea. It was just amazing to me, right? And then there's the supermarket, the farmer's market that's on Buford Highway is even more exotic. That is because there is a socio-economic demographic transformation taking place. Our school district is still operating in the 20th century mode. We have not made the transformation, which we will have to make, which we are making, which we will make, because that is the future. Children 18 and under represent 20% of the population. They represent 100% of our future. All children. And all children with the right support, the right resources, can learn and can be successful.
And you just opened the door to the elephant that's already in the room, which is race and class. And not just black and white, as you have already implied. The question is then, how do you keep the people who are thinking about saying, okay, I got to get my kids out of this school system because of the problems that it has or because of other reasons of their own, and keep them involved and their political leaders then involved to make sure that the district has the kind of support it's going to need financially and politically to move forward?
And that's the question. And oftentimes, not just in DeKalb, but throughout America, public education is a euphemism for race and class. It just is. We understand that. You study the history of public education, particularly in the South, and it's always been as a racially charged item. From its inception, during post-Civil War, Georgia, all the way up until today. Now, and oftentimes your steps are ordered and you don't really know how or why. But 42 years ago, I graduated from Clark Central High School. And it's interesting. In the fall of 1970, those of you all are from Georgia, something historic occurred in the South, in Georgia. And that was a year that we consolidated the all-black school district, which was then basically the predominantly all-white school district. And we were the first consolidated graduating class in Clark Central High School in Athens, Georgia. I was 18 years old, and that was the first time in my life that I had had a conversation with a white person my age. And that was the South. For 11 years, I went to all segregated schools. The only people I interacted with were other African Americans, right? And during the 42 years hence, and the classmates I didn't get a chance to meet or desired not to meet when I was in high school, I've had a chance to get to know them over the years. And it's been interesting. And, my most famous classmate who I wanted to meet and stay in touch with was Kim Basinger, but she doesn't. For some reason, she does not return my calls, but but we've changed, and see, we like to think that 40 years and that's 4 decades. But look, folks, for nearly 400 years, you had 250 years where African Americans were denied any access to education, right? Then you had another 150 years where we were separate but equal. And in 40 years, look how much progress has been made. You cannot undo and change 300-400 years of history in 40 years. But we have to recognize and celebrate where we are, but keep in perspective where we need to go. And that's why it doesn't bother me when I meet people who may have not evolved on the race issue or may have some subtle or unrecognized issues. It is this nation addressing the vestiges of a history that luckily we put behind ourselves. I don't damn anyone for it. Our challenge is to reach out to help people to understand. You have to go to the various communities. You have to open yourself up. And that's what I've tried to do over these 40 years, and we made progress. Now, what's interesting in Athens, during those 40 years, we have a class reunion, but we still have 2 class reunions. Right? We've come a long way, but we have a long way to go. And this young man who was in the vanguard of this new history of public education now has an opportunity to begin to address the future of public education in Georgia. And we might wish for the good old days when it was just black folk and white folk at each other's throat. It was simple then, wasn't it? But it's not that simple anymore. But I think this presents us with a great opportunity to change the conversation, to be more inclusive, to open up our own minds and attitudes, and recognize that if you're going to have a successful business, if you're going to be a successful leader, if you're going to be a successful anything in the 21st century, you must have skill sets that will allow you to engage and to work with and understand people of different races, cultures, creeds, and ethnic orientation. You just have to.
But then on top of that, you have people saying, I need to get out of this school district because of what's happened in the last 5 years, the last 10 years, the problems that this district has. So you've got Dunwoody talking about leaving. How do you go about keeping folks that you need to keep involved because of their moral, financial, political support?
And it's not just Dunwoody. See, and I was talking to Dr. Howell, who's over instruction for me. We look at Dunwoody and we might criticize them, but if you really think about it, majority to minority it was a system to move exceptional bright kids from a large population of kids who may not be as equally as bright into a more segregated location, right? That's what that is. And you really look at it, theme schools as well as charter schools, as well as private schools, and all of those are ways in which we were trying to deal with a problem. What I'm saying, what we have to do now, of course, continue to support our gifted kids, But at some point, we got to deal with the problem of people, young people, students who come from high poverty background, right, who may not live in our neighborhood, who may not attend my school, or may not even live inside my district, and recognize that what we have to, and it's okay to be self-interested, by the way. This is what I say to parents a lot on that issue. You must be self-interested about your children. You don't have to apologize because you're self-interested in ensuring that your child gets a good education. Should you? No, not to me, not anyone. But leaders, and this is what we talked about at Leadership DeKalb, you must develop what I call enlightened self-interest. Because enlightened self-interest will help you understand why it's important for you to be involved in helping other people's children get a quality education. Let me tell you why, and I love to do this. How many of you all were born, raised, and graduated from a high school in DeKalb County? Raise your hand. Always less than 5%. That meant that the rest of us were educated somewhere else, right? And it was paid for by taxes paid by other people. You can't raise my daughter, and your children in an enclosed, insulated bubble. I want my daughter to come of age in a world where there are opportunities not just for her, but also for her friends and her colleagues. Don't you? The challenge in DeKalb, and we can do this. All we got to, let me tell you what we have to do to ensure not only that we respond to SAC, but that we create an elite school system. All we have to do is develop the talent to understand the power of enlightened self-interest. Be self-interested about your child. But then, and particularly as leaders, develop the ability to be legitimately concerned about the education of other people's children. Let me tell you why. God forbid I get sick today and have to spend a night at DeKalb Regional or in a hospital. But if I do, I want my nurse who comes around to know how to read and write, who's distributing the medicine, right? That's why it's important. If you're a business owner, we got business people here, think about your workforce. You want to be profitable 5 and 10 and 15, 20 years from now, your future workforce is sitting in a classroom somewhere in DeKalb County. You want to sell your widgets and your products and you need people who have the resources and can purchase them. Your future consumers are sitting in a classroom somewhere in DeKalb County right now.
We got to move along to some questions from all of you, and if I don't get to yours, I apologize in advance. We've got some good ones already. Maybe this one can get a pretty short answer. How soon will you make decisions regarding which senior staff from Dr. Atkinson's team will stay and which will go? We were talking about decentralizing the central office. How soon will we have decisions there?
Well, first of all, whenever I go into a situation, I evaluate current personnel. The biggest mistake that leaders make, and we've seen it over and over again in the media, is you walk in the first day and you fire everybody that's there. That's a horrible leadership decision. That means I'm going to spend my first 6 months dealing with the fallout from that type of decision. And plus, there are some people you need and some people you may not need, but you have to be honest and objective in making that evaluation.
Is there a plan to develop DeKalb County schools leaders like district principals or district staff, principals, and teachers in alignment with the district's priorities to advance student learning? In other words, have you matched that up yet, the big plan, with the development of staff and the evaluation of staff?
Well, the first effort you will see is with the FY14 budget, when you begin to realign the resources to support the prime objective, which is improving academic achievement. You will see that. And there are some things that we are looking at that we will change and we are changing to support that effort. But you need a budget to support it. And the first time I'll have an opportunity to help to develop a budget that I can present to our board members will be FY14.
Any idea when the first draft of that will be?
It's an ongoing process now. I'm meeting with my CFO. Money is tight, but you know, I always felt that money was never really the primary challenge. Oftentimes, it's a lack of will, lack of ideas, lack of innovation that prevents all of us from being more successful than what we are now. $750 million is still a lot of money. If you are focused, and if you are purposeful, and if you are committed to a goal or an objective.
One question we hear a lot is, well, okay, you talked about 138 schools. Do we need fewer?
Well,
we had Ramona Tyson had a school closure plan. School closure came up right before Dr. Atkinson left. Is that on the table? And is there a plan to develop which schools?
Well, actually, we're implementing the plan that was actually developed just prior to my coming. And by the way, and I see Mr. Wilkins here who's over facilities, we are currently, right now, there are over nearly $200 million in capital projects ongoing in the district right now. We are on the cusp, if we can address these other issues, of being able to build a model 21st century school district, a highly diverse, socioeconomically, demographically, all the ways you can do it, and to do it successfully. And I can tell you there are not many models that will be similar to the one that we have, but this is what I told the State Board of Education. We're criticized because we're dealing, unfortunately, the issues bubbled up. But if you live in a school district where these issues are not being discussed, then you really need to talk to your school leaders. Because just because you hear about them and read about them in DeKalb doesn't mean they don't exist somewhere else. It's just that they have not dealt with them yet. The blessing we have is that we have the opportunity to address them in a progressive, positive way. No apologies, but we have to learn to be honest and to talk and to do what's right for the broader community.
Does that mean at this point then fewer schools? Some will close?
Some are closing, yes. Just at the last board meeting, there was a proposal presented to the board which they approved. Coming up, we're building 7 new elementary schools. 3 of them will start this year in 2013.
One question from the audience: what efforts will be made to expand successful academic programs like early college that significantly increase the likelihood of high school or of high school to college? You've got some successful models that are operating right now.
We do, and I know Georgia Perimeter College is here, and they're administering one of those successful models. We have to continue to support the things that are working, but we also have to recognize that success is not just going to college. There has to be multiple avenues to success. I was looking at a study just last week. Nationally, only 20% high school graduates actually go and graduate from a liberal arts 4-year institution. We have to recognize that there are technical opportunities, technical colleges, 2-year colleges, proprietary colleges that offer avenues of success for our children. Now, as a labor commissioner, I can tell you something. Those young people, and if you choose college, great, there's nothing wrong with that. But we have to recognize that every student may or shouldn't choose college, right? My parents were 20 years ago, 40 years ago, no, 60, 50 years ago. Time flies when you're having fun. All they told us was what? Go to college. You just like your parents just said, you got to go to college, son. Boy, you got to go to college. They never talked to me about what to major in. But in that economy, a college degree was almost a guarantee for employment, right? So I went to college, and I got a degree in philosophy and religion. There were no job openings for philosophers when I got out of college. But the reality is the technical arenas, even as automobile technician, heating and air, those jobs, many of them pay high salaries. So we have to learn to celebrate our young people who choose these alternative paths just as much as we celebrate those who decide to go to college and do well. That's my thought.
The CEO has joined us. Welcome, Mr. Ellis. Good to have you.
CEO.
And the reason I bring that up now is this question deals directly with that. Are there collaborative operational opportunities, talking about money and innovation, that you can foresee between the school system and the DeKalb County government, whether it's like fleet management or working in collaboration with some of the county departments or police and sheriff? What kinds of opportunities are there, if any?
Well, the CEO and the county commissioners, I've met with him on more than one occasion, several I guess 10 days ago, I went and we talked to and met with board members, members of the DeKalb County Commission, and we all agreed that the relationship had not been what it should be. But more important than that, in laboring in the past, we all committed to work closer together to do what's in the best interest of the children and the taxpayers and the citizens of this county. I've been very impressed by the outreach and the honesty and the sincerity I received from the CEO as well as the members of the county commission and the DeKalb County delegation, Republican and Democrat. Let me just say it, Republican and Democrat have all come forward and offered and are working with us to overcome the challenges that we face.
Then one key here, in addition to the leadership, is the parents. And that brings up the next question that we have. How do we get the parents involved in the lives of their children? That's an ongoing question in education. But this person says, we're spending about the same amount per child as parents of private schools. So why the difference in results?
Well, first, and it's important, study after study after study. Go on the internet for me today when you get home. Look up parental involvement in academic achievement. Studies show that the individual who has the greatest impact on a child's academic achievement is not the superintendent, not the school board member, not the principal, not the teacher. The individual who has the greatest impact on the success of a child's career are whom? Parents. Parents. Fuss all you want about school board members, but the individuals who have the greatest impact are parents. We are going to, now we have some strong PTAs and parent councils in the district, but in some schools, they are very weak or non-existent. You look at the schools where you have the highest achievement, one of the things that almost always exists is what? A strong PTA. Look at the schools that are more challenged, and you find that the PTA and the parental involvement is what? Weak. Now, under Title I, there is money that can be used to support improving and strengthening parental involvement. I was disappointed at the plan or lack of plan that we have had that focuses on and encourages parental involvement, particularly in the high poverty schools. That is going to change. We are looking at developing a plan and making a difference. And I know what you're saying, well, some kids don't have parents, blah, blah, blah. Let me tell you. There's an adult, there's an uncle, there's an aunt, there's a there's big mama, there's somebody who's interested that we can reach out to, and even if it's not 100%, if you're teaching, one of the big mistakes I think we made is that we've allowed politicians like me to shift all of the burden for educating our children on the teachers. We just have. And I see Miss Calvin back there, and Tracy Ann is there, and David sitting over to my right. And it's just not right. And the studies show that the greatest influence is whom?
So, stronger PTAs. Then what?
And an administration that recognizes that you got to have a partnership between the school, the parent, and the student in order to really be successful. Particularly if you're dealing with young people who come from more challenged backgrounds. And if you look at the schools, whether it's north, south, and east and west, whether it's Arabia Mountain or Shamley or Dunwoody, one of the things that's consistent, regardless of demographics, in those schools that are succeeding and are successful is strong parental involvement. That's what distinguishes the charter schools. That's the one thing I really like about charter schools, is that in order to get your child into a charter school, the parent has to commit to do what? And they wonder and say, well, what is it about charter schools? That is the critical element as to why charter schools and public schools are successful, is the parental involvement. Now, we're going to have to teach it. I have to understand it, and I got to tell you this story. One of my favorite things in life was coming home, and my dad had helping me with my homework, right? I still remember it to this day. I can see him, even when I'm sitting over there sometimes on Mountain Industrial, sitting with my big desk. I look in the corner, and my father, who's deceased, I can still see him watching and doing my homework. I was in middle school when my mother told me, said, now you know your daddy can't read or write. hold up, wait a minute. How, what? He can't read or write, but he's been helping me with reading and writing. What I come to understand as a parent, he could offer me no assistance technically, but he was present by his presence. The fact that he was present in the room. And I tell my parents, I see us when Stevenson played Martin Luther King, I see us, right? In the stands, I see us, shoulder to shoulder. But you also have to be present at PTA and parent-teacher conference. Children, young people have to know it's important. I got parents here. Your son is sitting here today because he knows what? It's important to you that he is successful in school.
So will that be, and quick yes or no here because I want to bring up our STAR students, but will that be one of the criteria by which you evaluate principals, for instance, when it comes to looking at all of those schools?
Yes.
How they've been able to increase parent involvement.
What we're doing, we're inventorying I think for the first time, the relative strength or weakness of our PTAs at every school. And that's ongoing. I know Dr. Howard's working on it. We're working with Ms. Marcia Coward, who's over PTA. And those PTAs of parent councils that are weak, we're going to come in and provide technical assistance to support them. The teachers are already busy, so we got to create more resources to strengthen the parent-teacher council, who will ultimately strengthen the classroom where our teachers are.
We've talked a lot about focusing on students now. A big part of that is hearing from them. I want to bring up our STAR students who are going to ask the superintendent a few questions and chat with them themselves. So please make them welcome. First we have Carrie Thomas from Arabia Mountain High and Kadeem Trimble from Druid Hills High.
Hey, Ms. Thomas, how you doing?
Hi, Carrie.
Nice to meet you.
Hi, Kadeem. Nice to meet you.
I wasn't nervous with Dennis, but now I'm nervous.
All right.
Good morning.
Can everybody hear Kadeem? Okay.
I'm Kadeem Trimble from Druid Hills High School, and I'm a senior. And my first question to Superintendent, how would you keep up teacher morale, although new teachers are working more with less pay?
Great question. First, obviously, I can't offer more pay. Can't do it. But survey after survey with employees will tell you that the primary reason for dissatisfaction with the supervisor is not necessarily pay. It's not feeling like you appreciate it. And so since I can't offer pay, one of the things we're doing, new superintendents always come in with new programs, new ideas, more work for teachers to do. I don't know whether you all have noticed, I've not announced my new golden, whiz-bang magic wand to change academics in the district. What we're doing is inventorying to see what we can eliminate. Some things are mandated by the federal government, some are mandated by the state. But things that we have control over, I've directed the people at the senior level to inventory what we are doing, and things that we can eliminate will be eliminated before we go forward.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Carrie Thomas, and I'm from Arabia Mountain High School. My first question is, obviously with a change in leadership, there's going to be a change within the schools. What kind of effect do you see as far as students are concerned from this year to the next year?
Well, first, the part of the job that I enjoy most is interacting with students. I was at Arabia Mountain last week, and I was telling someone coming in, it's exhilarating to be around young people who have limitless potential. And one of the things I hope to be working with my student advisory council students, I want to know and be a part of their decision-making, their careers, and to support them. And I want us to enjoy what we do. I want my employees to continue to enjoy your work and to recognize that your work is important and that you're important. The attitude, it was a cloud hanging over the district when I came. And so what we had to do, Ernie, was to try to lift that cloud and let people know we're all in it together. And the one thing I did tell them is I will not lie to you. I will be honest. I will tell you the truth as I see it. And one of the truths that I will tell you is that I see a way forward from the challenges that we face.
To piggyback on the question about old teachers leaving and new teachers coming in, what is in place to teach and train the new teachers how to deal with classroom management and other obstacles they might face?
Well, that's great. That goes to us having a better understanding of the population that we are serving. And then providing, Dr. Howe, we talked about it yesterday, technical support and expertise and finding schools where it's working. That's what I'm saying, asset-driven strategies. Find those schools that are succeeding and model and emulate what they are doing and allow them to train and teach other principals and teachers how to do it. You know, we really don't have to reinvent this wheel. There are schools in this district and all over this country dealing with similar populations and being very successful with it. It's not an impossibility. It's not a mountain too high.
Earlier, you talked about how much the DeKalb County school system has changed as far as its demographics. From a student's perspective, a change in technology is also taking place, but it's not necessarily at a great pace. During Bill Clinton's administration, they called for an investment in technology, and that's something that's been pushed nationally ever since. In your fiscal plan, how are you planning to advance technology within the schools?
Well, I want to thank the voters for approving the most recent East Block. Included in that, I think, was $40 million that will be invested in improving technology throughout the district. Right now, we are already working in 37 schools to install wireless connectivity. 7 have been completed. We expect to have the entire district completed by September of this year, and there's 100% connectivity on hardwire. We're going to have smart boards in every classroom. The money has already, you all voted for it, and it is being implemented as we speak. And this will maintain DeKalb's position as a state, regional, and national leader in technological innovation in our school.
My question is, you can put 100 iPads in a classroom, but if you don't have an adequate teacher to teach the information to the student, how would you keep the seasoned teachers in the classroom?
Well, we have teachers who love DeKalb County, and sometimes, and it's a difficult decision, no matter how much you love teaching, you still have to pay your bill. And oftentimes, our teachers may leave DeKalb to go to other districts. What we are doing, what I'm going to try to do going forward, number one, maintain as many of our veteran teachers as possible, but also to build a cadre of new teachers who are motivated, who understand that they are part of something. And one of the things I always say, remember who's in the room when the times were hard. Remember who stayed with you when your business was just starting and when you weren't getting your bills paid, or when you began the political career, no one knew you, who you were, what your name was. Those are the people you want by your side. And so what I'm saying to stakeholders and teachers and everyone in DeKalb, remember who was in the room, because in the near future, DeKalb will be recognized as a national model on how you deal with highly diverse, very different socioeconomic groups. You can't see it now, but you'll see it, because you'll get to live. You're going to come back and say, yeah, you told me you did it. This is where we're going. This is the direction we're moving in. And see, sometimes we see challenges in life, but sometimes your blessings are disguised. And out of controversy and conflict, you can create great opportunity. And I think that's what's happening here in DeKalb.
Another thing about teachers leaving, a lot of them that I know of say that a big thing of that is the parents. How do you want to, I guess, improve parental involvement as far as like PTA and like expand programs, expand communication between the teachers and the parents?
That's it. Explain that a little bit more. What's the issue with parents and teachers as they explain it to you?
A lot of my teachers say that, you know, parents aren't necessarily involved. They don't know what's going on in the classroom, and they are like focused on their child, self-driven, and it's just not really relating to what's going on in the classroom, and it's making a burden on the teachers, and that's one of the reasons why they're kind of leaning towards leaving.
No, I agree with you 100%. And if you look throughout the district, and one of the other ways this manifests itself is in this whole north-south divide. And part of the narrative is, and some of it's true, is that the schools in the north have more resources than what? Schools in the south. I mean, that is the demarcation line. in DeKalb County. And bridging that will be a challenge. But let me tell you one of the things that go into your question. You might walk into Fernbank or one of the schools in the north and you might see all new band equipment, right? And the first thought is Michael Thurmond sent a check up to the north side to buy new band equipment, but he didn't send one to the south side. What we ignore is that through PTAs, parents raise and contribute hundreds of thousands of dollars to support the educational, am I right, teachers? They just do. They do. And see, that helps to create dissension in the district because you have some schools where you have really outstanding parental involvement, and then you have some where there's not, and what you're seeing is a dichotomy in funding, but not necessarily from the central office. I know what you're thinking. Say, well, but obviously some parents, I have more money to contribute than another parent, and you got to recognize that. So that's why we have to put in support. But I've also done a whole lot of Men's Day and Women's Day speeches. We raise a lot of money, don't we? Some folk don't get that, but I just move on. Okay, all right, yeah, you know that's, all right, okay, all right, okay, all right. I'll leave it there.
I think that's all for our questions.
Yeah, aren't they great?
Yeah.
Give them a hand, aren't they great? Mr. Trimble will be enrolling at Emory next year, and you're going to?
I haven't decided on school yet, but I have a few options.
Tell us about your options.
Georgia Tech, Northwestern University, Carnegie Mellon University, and the University of Pittsburgh.
Good job.
Congratulations to both of you, and thanks for your questions. They were great.
Great question.
Yeah, you can get into my business anytime. Just real quickly, how long, you talked about finding a new superintendent. How long will you be in this job as interim, and would you be interested in the job permanently?
No, I came to help, and I'm on leave from my law firm, but what I said the first day when Marshall Orson and those called me over, and the gym, the vice chair is there, and the thing I said to them is, I'm here to help. And that's what I'm here to do. As long as they need me to help, I'll help. But at the interim, I know that I have some tough decisions to make. The next superintendent shouldn't be burdened with some of the tough decisions that I'm going to have to make. And that's one of the reasons, part of the strategy that I came as an interim. I'm not here trying to make a way for the future. These issues have to be addressed now, and that will increase the probability of success for your next superintendent.
So there's no definite timeline, it's just as long as it takes?
Well, I have a 12-month contract. And Mr. Robert Brown is here. Stand up, Robert. He was on the, he's the monitor from the governor's office. Stand up, Mr. Brown. He's here monitoring.
Well, just as a quick example to follow up.
You tell the governor I said good things about him.
Just as a quick example to follow up, in one of the neighboring districts, Earl Davis came in for what he thought was going to be a particular period of time, and he's staying just a little longer. Is that something that you're thinking, okay, after 12 months I might have to stick around?
No. I'm here to do what I was called to do. And I'll be honest with you, the morning that Marshall and those called me, I didn't wake up saying, I wonder if they're going to call me over at the DeKalb School District. That was not on my agenda. But I believe the steps are ordered. I'm here for a purpose, for a moment, and to do a certain job. And then I'll be perfectly willing to go back to doing what I was doing before they were called.
Will there have to be a superintendent in place before you go?
Absolutely. You can't leave the job vacant. We'll have a great superintendent in place and he or she won't come into the situation that I walked into. People deserve better than that. And that will give the next superintendent a much greater probability of success.
Okay. That is the time we have. Obviously, we've just started the conversation. So if there's anything that I can say to all of you that I would imagine that the folks at Leadership DeKalb and the Chamber would say, it is to stay involved. You're here because you want to be involved, stay involved. Thanks so much.
Good job. Excellent. Your parents here? Where are they?